Hi Summit families, I hope you're all having a great day, getting ready to read chapter 8 of Humphrey's Adventures. It is titled Batten Down the Hatches. Once I was back in room 26, I spent a lot of time in my sleeping hut, trying hard not to think about boats. Every once in a while though, I couldn't resist checking up on my friend's progress. With Mr. Brisbane's advice and the help, holes were drilled, keels were attached, and boats were sanded and painted, and sails were raised. He seemed especially pleased with the progress Kirk and Richie were making with their tall ship. Just make sure those sails don't weigh the boat down, he told them. I'm going to test it at home tonight, Kirk said. After Mr. Brisbane moved, Richie turned to Kirk. Maybe I could test it at home. Have you ever sailed a boat before? Asked Kirk. Richie admitted that he hadn't. But I can tell if it sinks or swims or sails. Look, I've done this before with my dad, Kirk explained. He knows all about boats. He was in the Navy. But I haven't done anything, Richie complained. Great, said Kirk. You'll get a prize and you don't have to do the work. Trust me, we'll win. I guess Richie couldn't think of anything else to say, but he sure looked miserable. Kirk didn't seem to notice. Hey, where do fish sleep? He asked suddenly. Richie just stared at Kirk. In a waterbed, Kirk chuckled. Richie didn't. And Gail didn't look any happier than Richie. Heidi had been out with a cold, so Gail had to work alone. And her mother, who was always encouraging the students, continued to insist that she decorate the sail. Why can't it just be white? Gail asked. That's so unimaginative, Mrs. Morgenstern replied. Remember how you resisted changing your room, and now you love your golden walls, don't you? Yes, but that's different, Gail answered quietly. So Gail continued to spend time working on the hull of the boat. I think she was delaying the time when she had to decorate the sail, or upset her mom if she didn't. I felt sorry for Richie and Gail, but at least they'd have a chance to sail on Potter's Pond and have a picnic with Treasure, while I just sit in room 26 with no one to talk to but a twangy old frog. I know Og's a nice guy, and I wasn't being fair to him, but I was feeling really down in the dumps. Even when Mrs. Brisbane read Jolly Roger's Guide to Life, I wasn't very cheered up. I thought I couldn't feel any lower until school was over and Mrs. Wright came in. She was carrying a clipboard and had her shiny whistle around her neck. It's hard to relax around a woman who always wears a shiny whistle. Mrs. Brisbane, here are a few more forms you'll need for the field trip, she announced abruptly. I was surprised to see Mrs. Brisbane just smiled and said, Fine, I'll make sure they're taken care of. By the deadline, Mrs. Wright snapped back. Of course, Mrs. Wright replied. Now, Ruth, I have an idea. To make sure that our field trip is safe and orderly and everything goes smoothly, I was wondering if there was any chance you could come along and supervise. I think if I had been on my wheel, I would have fallen off. Mrs. Wright looked about as startled as I felt. Well, I don't know, she said. I mean, yes, it would make sense. Perhaps I could have rearranged my schedule that day. You'd be a big help, Mrs. Brisbane said, although I didn't agree. And you'd have a lot of fun. Mrs. Wright looked even more startled than before. Oh, well, of course, that wouldn't be my purpose for being there, she said. Mrs. Brisbane flashed her big smile. Of course not. But it wouldn't hurt to have some fun, would it? So with that, Mrs. Brisbane's idea, that was Mrs. Brisbane's idea. She wanted to help Mrs. Wright have some fun. I didn't think even a wise teacher could make that happen. The only fun Mrs. Wright had was when she blew her whistle, which wasn't for fun for small creatures with sensitive ears like mine. Good luck, I muttered as Mrs. Brisbane left the room. Good night, she answered cheerily. That evening, I had to listen to the splishing and splashing coming from Og's tank, which only reminded me that he could swim as much as he liked, while I was forbidden to be in the water. I guess Aldo didn't know that I wouldn't be joining them at joining the class at Potter's Pond, he continued to whistle and dance the hornpipe and say things like "arg" and "me hearty." And when he called me a salty dog, I felt sad, 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 because there's one thing I'm not, and that's an unreasonable creature like a dog. On Thursday night, Aldo said a very strange thing. "Maria has made me a pirate outfit. She says I look handsome in it." Maria was Aldo's very nice wife, and I could hardly believe she wanted him to be a pirate too. "I tell you, me buckaroos, this pirate's life agrees with me," he added. Then he pushed his cleaning trolley out of room 26, turned off the light, and closed the door. "Og," I squeaked. I could hear the faint splashing of the water. "Og, do you think Aldo is going to be a pirate and sail away and we'll never see him again?" "Boing, boing, boing, boing," Og responded in a very alarming way. "I hope not either," I answered, although I'm usually only guessing what Og is trying to say. Aldo had left the blinds open, so the street light outside lit up room 26, and it bathed in a soft glow. The tables were pushed together, so the boats were all in a row. "I'm taking a little walk, Og," I suddenly announced, flinging my cage door open. I was able to drop down on the table where Og and I lived, directly onto the table with the boats. It was grand seeing them up close. There was a beautiful swan boat with real feathers that Saya and Miranda brought in. The pirate flag looked wonderfully menacing on the boat that Garth and AJ built. I had nothing but admiration for the colorful Chinese junk that Tabitha and Seth designed, and the Viking boat that Art and Mandy created tilted a bit much to one side, but they still had time to fix it. The tall ship was missing because Kirk had taken it home to test it. Gail's boat, and it was practically hers alone since Heidi was gone all week, was plain and simple, just like the poster of the classic sailboat on the wall. My friends were doing a great, great, great job. And in spite of my own disappointment, I was proud of them. But suddenly I remembered that the boat I had sketched in my notebook, the SS Golden Hamster, with its impressive hamster flag. None of my friends had even thought of a flag except the pirate flag on Garth and AJ's boat. I looked around the piles of art supplies in front of me and picked out a lovely triangle of aluminum foil and a toothpick. I carefully inserted the toothpick in the foil, and what do you know? It looked just like a silvery flag on a flagpole. I planted it right in front of Gail's boat, sticking it in the mound of modeling clay. It was a way to make my mark and congratulate my friends on their good work. And even though they'd never know whose flag it was, after all, it wasn't their fault. I'd be a landlubber forever. There's always plenty of time to think after Aldo leaves, and that night I couldn't help thinking about Kirk and how he was treating Richie. I'd never seen him act like that before. Everybody in room 26 wanted to win the prize for the race, but my other friends weren't acting like Kirk. What had gotten into him? Then I started to think about the weekend I had spent not so long ago at Kirk's house. It was fun, 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 because Kirk's family is nice to visiting hamsters, and they like to laugh like Kirk does. He has a mom and a dad and an older sister named Chrissy and an older brother, Kevin. Kirk and Kevin shared a room. They had matching beds, matching lamps, and matching desks. Over each desk was a shelf. On Kirk's shelf, there was a dictionary, a globe, 5 joke books, and a red ribbon tacked to the shelf. On Kevin's shelf, there were 3 silver trophies, 4 gold trophies, 4 plaques in a row of red and blue and gold ribbons. There must have at least been 10 of them. I didn't pay much attention to the difference between the shelves until Kirk pointed out that Saturday afternoon. He and I were alone in his room. Kevin was out running track, which according to Kirk is a lot like spinning my wheel, but you run in a circle on the ground. "See all those trophies and ribbons, Humphrey?" Kirk asked. "Those are Kevin's awards for sports. He's great at all sports, basketball, soccer, swimming. Look at all of them," he said. "Pretty amazing, aren't they?" Yes, 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 I squeaked. I must admit, I was impressed. Kirk pointed to the lone ribbon on his shelf. That's the only award I've ever got. For honorable mention in the talent show I did last year. I did a comic routine. I should have gotten a gold. Since I hadn't been around for the talent show and I wasn't even sure what it was, I didn't comment. You should see my sister's room, Kirk continued. I'd show it to you, but she doesn't let me in there. Anyway, she has 2 shelves of awards for grades and the debate team. That's where people get points for arguing and drama competitions and speech contests. I don't know, every time Chrissy opens her mouth, she gets an award. I was still thinking about debating. I don't like arguments one bit, but humans get awarded for them. Kirk flopped down in his bed. Dad always says I better get busy if I'm going to fill up my shelf. Then he says he's just kidding, but I'm not sure. It's just, well, I'm good at being funny, but they don't give awards for that. I got an award once for my Halloween costume, but Kirk seemed so upset, I didn't think it was a good time to mention it. Suddenly, Kirk sat up. Hey, Humphrey, did you hear about the scarecrow who got a big award for being outstanding in his field? He laughed loudly. Get it? See, a scarecrow stands in a field. Outstanding in his field? Unsqueakably funny, I said, though I was exaggerating a little. I've got 1,000,000 of them, Kirk said. Did you hear the story about a spaceship? It was out of this world. He chuckled again, and so did I. Kirk jumped up and stood close to my cage. Here's one for you, Humphrey. What did the hamster say when you broke his leg? Quick, call the hambulance. A hambulance? Now that was funny. I hopped on my wheel to show Kirk the joke made me happy. If I had gotten a gold ribbon, I would have given it to him. Like I said, it was quiet in room 26. Og never squeaks up, much less to tell a joke. Og, did you hear the one about a boy who wanted a prize so badly he'd even hurt his best friend's feelings to win it? I asked my neighbor. Og didn't laugh, but that was okay. The situation wasn't one bit funny, and I didn't have an idea of how to make things better between Kirk and Richie. It didn't take long for Gail to notice the flag the next morning. Heidi was back too. She asked who had made it. When the girls asked around, nobody knew anything about it, except me, but nobody asked. When Mrs. Morgenstern came over to check on the progress, she asked Gail how she decided to decorate the sail. Mom, could I just make a flag instead? She asked. Fabulous idea, Mrs. Morgenstern replied. I love it. She seemed pleased, and so did Gail, who went right to work. First, she studied nautical flags in one of Mrs. Brisbane's books. It turns out there's a whole language for flags. Boats raise them to send messages to shore or to other boats. Then Gail designed her own series of flags with brightly colored stripes and patterns. I was happy I had been able to inspire her again. Mr. Brisbane helped her string them along the side of the mast. Mrs. Morgenstern loved them, and best of all, Gail did too. It was a fine boat. They were all fine boats, especially after Mr. Brisbane helped Art and Mandy get their Viking ship to stand up straight. Kirk looked very surprised when Mr. Brisbane checked out their tall ship. It floated perfectly last night, Kirk said. I knew it would. Mr. Brisbane was full of praise. After he moved on, Kirk turned to Richie and said, I think we've pretty much got first prize wrapped up. You've got first prize wrapped up, Richie snapped. I'm just a big nobody. Kirk looked surprised. Come on, Richie. No one has to know I did all the work. You'll look like a winner. But I don't feel like one. Richie quickly got up and sharpened about 1,000,000 pencils. After a while, Mrs. Brisbane noticed and went over and talked to him. Is everything okay? She asked. I guess, he answered. She tried to get more information out of him, but he just kept sharpening pencils. So she wandered over to Kirk and asked him if everything was all right. Yeah, the boat's fantastic. Look, he answered. I mean between you and Richie, Mrs. Brisbane said. Sure, we make a great team, Kirk said. He sounded as if he meant it. Does Kirk really think Richie doesn't mind being left out? I squeaked to Og. Boing, Og answered. He didn't sound very enthusiastic. Keep an eye on me enemies, me hearties. There may be a mutiny brewing. From Jolly Roger's Guide to Life by Icy Waters. The next chapter is number 9, and it is titled Secrets, Secrets Everywhere. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and look forward to hearing chapter 9. Bye, guys.